Hey, wait, where are we? We're not here. We're not visible. There we go.
Ta-da.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, how you doing? Hey. So, coming up this week, I completely did everything wrong tonight. So we'll do it again. Take two. Why not? It's our show. We don't get paid. We can do whatever we want, right?
Sure.
All right. So, take two. Cold open. All right. Coming up this week, we're getting rebellious. Mostly. It's the Clone Wars Season 5, Episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5 right here on your Star Wars safe space. Stick around. Okay, much better.
And we're back.
I'm happy to get a second round of the music. It's all good.
Yeah, I'll never get tired of it. I'll never get tired of it. It's a banger. It's a banger. All right. Hey there, Star Warriors. Welcome to Star Wars Safe Space, your non-toxic low-sodium Star Wars show that doesn't make you feel bad for not knowing that Steela Gerrera's character, played by the absolutely fabulous and incredible Forrest Whitaker in live action, was inspired by Argentinian revolutionary Che Guevara. I know how to read. I really do. And Marlon Brando's Colonel Kurtz from the 1979 film Apocalypse Now. If you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, is deep. It's deep, but I can totally see how the inspiration for Saw was built. So that's good stuff. So if whether you're a hardcore Star Wars fan or just a little swarzy curious, this is your Star Wars safe space, and we are the Circle of Nerds, and we do in fact love Star Wars, even if we don't always like it. So let's meet this motley bunch, shall we? So let's see who's gonna be first. If I poke that, not that guy. All right. So the fabulous, amazing pilot of the Parma Flyer is Crash.
How you doing, everybody? S-Foil's locked, ready to go. Let's do this.
I like what you did, Captain of the Parma Flyer. I like that.
Yeah, I'm learning.
All right, that's pretty cool. And hailing from parts unknown, it's our Holocron Keeper, the Keeper of the Holocron, T to the Oni.
Welcome back to the Galaxy, everybody. Let's get going.
Yeah. And I am Tommy D, that dude over there. Okay. So what are we doing here? Well, our mission is to watch all of the canon Star Wars films and TV shows in chronological order, breaking them down, connecting the dots, and learning more about Star Wars and maybe even a little about ourselves. So in a word of warning to all you would-be Star Warriors out there will be spoilers. So this week we're going to get into it with what could be considered the spark of rebellion. Perhaps this is where we're starting to see some things happen. But before we do that, we've got some news, right? Tony, you got some news for us.
We do. Well, I mean, a little bit of history in this case. Right. But
take it.
Today, the last episodes of the micro series were released, and that just takes us right into the very lead up to episode 3, which as we know is coming back into theaters. So that's going to be some fun, and perhaps we'll have to rewatch that before we go into the movies.
Yeah, you might be right. The micro series is so good. It is so good. It is for those of you that haven't watched the micro series, we're actually going to be getting into it a little bit more. Actually, not too terribly far off. We're going to be hitting it a couple episodes. Actually, not fairly soon at all. Now that I think about it, so we still have to get through all of Rebels. We still have to get through all of Bad Batch, the rest of the Clone Wars. Anyway, forget what I said. It's going to be a while before we get to the micro series. But by all means, please do watch it on your own. It's so good, and it's. They're micro episodes. They're only a couple minutes long each, but it's
in the days of dial-up. Do you remember having to watch things like that on dial-up internet where you just had that annoying lag if your Wi-Fi was too slow?
Yeah.
Oh my! Like watching the original trailers for the prequel movies was just murder compared to today. I don't think kids appreciate that.
I don't know. I think I might have a few years on you. I think I got you by about 10 years. So I mean, do you remember dial-up? Do you remember dial-up internet?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Tony, do you?
I remember it. It was definitely in my youth, but I remember it.
Like Tony's like, I remember my parents talking about it, but I don't know.
like I remember going to do homework and getting on the internet and then being yelled at because I turned off their phone call.
Yeah.
I remember my dad calling. He worked third shift, so he finally called home and like, who the hell's been on the phone all night long? Because our phone was tied into our internet, and if you were on the internet, the phone wouldn't connect.
Right.
For those of you those weren't there for this time, it was a great thing. It was like the anti-telemarketer gold. Unfortunately, it also kept your dad from calling home from work when he really wanted to get through to you. Sorry, Dad.
Right. And if you were into the early days of like online gaming or chat rooms or anything like that, it was it was rough unless you were like super fancy and had a separate phone line for your computer and then one for your home phone. But I mean, those were the kids we would hang out with, like, because they had cable and they had like an extra phone line for their internet. So we would hang out at their house, even if we didn't like them,
oh yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, trying to watch things back then on dial-up, like, using AOL to try to connect, and it's just like beep, I don't know. Anyway, we're already off topic.
I think in droid speak you just swore like a mile long, whatever that was.
That's all right, man. Then we have a lot of droid action this week. We had a lot of droid action. We've got this new rebel cell looking to take back their homeworld of Onderon against the separatist droid armies. And Onderon is actually a rescue from the EU. So if you're not familiar with that, I think Onderon was from the Tales of the Jedi comic series, like back in '93, and but it takes place like thousands of years, in the past. So once again, Dave, dipping into the EU to bring us some goodness.
Don't play Easter egg hunting with Dave for money, because he'll beat you every time.
Oh, if you try to deep cut or Easter egg hunt with Dave, you'll lose. Did you watch the series that they did when The Mandalorian came out, that roundtable series? With all the directors just sitting there, just chit-chatting. Hearing Dave Filoni talk in that group, everybody else there was a fan, no doubt about it. Every single director on the Mandalorian series is a Star Wars fan. They were Star Wars fans when they were kids, whatever. Dave is different. I feel like Dave is one of us. Dave was in his room playing with action figures, playing with his Star Wars toys, and waiting years in between films to come out, decades in between films to come out, and just waiting, and creating all of these worlds and scenarios in his head using his action figures. And now he's playing with life-size action figures. But like, to hear him speak, to hear this guy talk about Star Wars and about the characters, it's the same, like with Sam Witwer. It's that same level of love and passion and dedication that you don't see directors and producers have, in Hollywood. Most of the time they're there for a job. They go in, they do the job. They want to make changes and make it their own thing, and it never works. But then you've got people like Sam and Dave and Jon Favreau as well. But yeah, like you said, I mean, just hearing Dave talk about Star Wars, I could just like, I want Dave to do a podcast. Forget this. I would unplug this podcast tomorrow if Dave Filoni sat down and did a podcast just to talk about all of the stuff that he knows. I'm here for it. 100%.
I'm switching channels right now if he starts.
Yeah. And that was Damn. You're just going to. Okay, wait. Here we go.
To listen. I would listen to it.
At least wait for the body to get cold. Fuck. All right. So should we get down to it and talk about this thing? So in these episodes, this was a great little arc. A lot of people have said it's filler. It's kind of like a filler arc. We've seen filler episodes. This is not, in my opinion, I don't find this to be filler at all.
No.
I say it all the time. With Dave Filoni, filler is prologue. I mean, and Saw Gerrera is a perfect example of something that you would think this would be a quick write off of, like, okay, it's a short arc. We're never going to hear about this guy again. And somebody at Lucasfilm was smart enough to say, they start putting pieces in place, going, okay, we got this guy from Rogue One. He's a little extreme. Where did he come from? Well, and I'll get into that later, but it's interesting to see sort of the retroactive retconning of his life story,
right?
And especially the fact that, like, the whole idea the rebellion may have been actually started by Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader himself.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up. We're definitely going to be touching on that. But it is very interesting because you've got this character, Saw Gerrera, who is really polarizing. A lot of people, and we actually see that polarization between Anakin and Obi-Wan when they're talking about going to Onderon, and Obi-Wan's like, we don't really do the terrorism thing, and Anakin's like, it's not terrorism. They're not terrorists. They're rebels. They're insurgents. It's different. Like, he's, but like you said, Anakin was like, we're going to teach them how to hit the separatists where it hurts. And then Obi-Wan is trying to be that voice of reason. Like, and I love that moment where Anakin's like, what's the matter, Obi-Wan? You don't trust me? And he was like, oh, that's the problem. I think I trust you too much. And then so they go. And it was also very interesting to see Ahsoka and some of her reactions. In the first 2 episodes, she was really kind of hanging back, and she was really observing. She was observing the back and forth between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and the camera kept cutting to her, and she's just kind of like, mom and dad are fighting again. So we're not fighting, but
yeah.
And then once they get to Onderon, she's doing it again between, the Gerrera siblings and her little boy toy, her little love interest. We'll talk about that a little bit, so again, more growth for Ahsoka, as always, and I thought it was great. So the themes, and this is what I want to get into, and then you guys just pour on whatever you've got. So the themes in this obviously are that thin line between rebel and terrorist, between insurgent or traitor. That's kind of like, and I think Saw had said it. He said resistance is not terrorism. That we the separatists took over because we allowed them to take over, and there's kind of some parallels between that and what's going on these days around these parts.
Yes, there is.
So and actually, before we get into that, can we please talk about really quickly, and then we'll get into the deep conversation, but can we talk about the Captain Rex drip for a minute? Can we talk about the outfit, the fit, the look, the drip?
You think he, like, when he said, Anakin called him and said, okay, we're going on a mission. He's digging through the closet for, like, his sweetest gear, best Conde clothes. Like, okay, I'd throw a little hat on, some goggles, got my, like, thing for my helmet on. His
J guys were on the chest plate.
That was he's been sitting on that for weeks, waiting for an excuse to wear it.
When he rolls out, because it's like the standard. It looked like the standard issue, like, clone officer uniform, but then he added some armor pieces to it, in the hat and everything. When he came out, I was like, ooh, Daddy Rex, you're looking kind of nice right now. Oh my goodness. And I would love to cosplay that. That would be so cool. I've seen a few cosplayers for that, but not very many. But that, man, Rex is he's the coolest clone, man. I don't care what anybody says. He's the coolest. We'll have to do that sometime. We need to rank our clones, our favorite clones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not right now.
No. That'll be a good one to kind of ponder. You gotta, like,
you need a couple of days.
Yeah,
go through that.
Definitely not doing that on the fly.
Yeah, no, not on the fly. Like, I'm good because, like, my top 5 are Captain Rex, Captain Rex, and Gregor. So that's like my top 5. Barely Gregor, barely.
Well, and I guess going before we get into the fashion of Onderon, Tony, what did you think of this arc? I mean, this is kind of
Tony's never seen this before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was great. And for me, I think the biggest thing, I mean, you already touched on, the concept of, are they terrorists or are they rebels? Are they insurgents? And I mean, for me, that comes down to PR, essentially. I mean, it's all a point of view and how you present yourself to the people. And they do a very good job in these episodes, Steela and the rebel force, of making sure that they are doing the absolute minimum amount of damage to civilians, if any at all.
Right.
And making their intentions clear. And as a result of that, they get the people behind them, and that helps drive the story forward. For me, I think the biggest thing was seeing Ahsoka be trusted with this. I mean, they make very clear, hey, listen, when you guys start this whole thing, you are going to draw the attention to Dooku. They're going to come with everything they have. And Dooku, who neither Obi-Wan nor Anakin have defeated on their own, go, you're fine, Ahsoka. You can handle it with
They really did.
He does.
They really did they took her training wheels off. I mean, they've been off. I don't want to say that. But I mean, for this, they really did just kind of dip out. And they said, you know what? Handle it, Snips. And she did. I think she handled it pretty well.
Well, to a degree. For me, the biggest thing, I remember when this show first aired, I was in the Rebel Legion. Everybody knows I was a big Rebel pilot and a Jedi costumer. And I had that like moment of, as soon as they said the T word, I kind of cringed, because I know a lot of guys who would take caption pictures of people like me, and they sort of buy a little too in the universe with the whole costuming thing. And here's a few rebel terrorists. And I was like, dude, first off, we're just people. This isn't real. This isn't real. Right. Take it down a notch, dial down the rhetoric. The guys who start arguing in public, well, the Empire was the legitimate government. And to your point earlier, Anakin was very clear about the fact that we're going to train them to target the separatists, not civilians. And for me,
right,
that is the bit. George Washington is a terrorist if you're in England back then.
It all depends on who wins.
Who wins,
and the point of view.
And we put him on, his name, in monuments and everything, because we won the war. But people get in the fandoms, especially with the Star Wars and the Rebel Alliance and the Empire and all. People were getting a little too casual throwing the T word around, and I was very aware of the fact. I was like, okay, because Battlestar Galactica had a great arc where the Cylons take over the planet they're on, and it was just one of those things. The head of the Resistance in that story was basically like, look, there are no out of bounds. Everything's up for and that's where things get murky. And that, that's like. Yeah. You hear about the problems they had in Ireland with the British and the terrorist attack, because they call it terrorism when civilians were getting in the way. I like the idea that the Jedi were very conscious of civilian casualties being kept to a bare minimum, and just being the droids.
And I think that there's a lot to be said for that, because it's like, at what point do you draw the line, and at what point do you cross it in the name of freedom, in the name of liberty? Because I'm glad you brought up Ireland, because obviously they had their that period, I think it was called the Troubles.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend to be a history buff, but they wanted a unified Ireland. They wanted all of the counties together, under one Irish banner, and it still is not a unified country. But like the IRA was considered, on a global scale, they were considered a terrorist organization, but they would have seen themselves, and in many ways still do see themselves, as freedom fighters. But again, it's like, where's the line? And I think these episodes kind of kind of like subtly and almost not so subtly drew that line. It's like you don't harm civilians.
Even when they first moved into the city, you know, there were scenes where Saw and the guys would like attack her, and the people that were just passing by were afraid, you know, as anybody would be if, you know, gunfire starts. But I think, again, because because of the level of content, you know, I want to say this is a kid show, but this is an animated show. It's geared to a younger audience. This is why I can kind of see a show like this or Rebels in the same universe as Andor, where they sort of are very clear on the idea that, okay, we have good guys, we have bad guys. The good guys don't do bad things, you know? And whereas in Andor, we may see him do some things that, like in Rogue One, you know, he shoots his informant in the back, and you kind of go, oh.
Right.
But, you know, that was for a little more mature audience. But as a whole, you could see both shows existing in the same universe because the general theme is still there. It's, you know, there's a rebellion against a tyrannical government.
Right. And like, even with that, like, you know, going back to what you said about this being kids show. Yes, it's geared. I think at this point, as we're hitting season 5, I think that the only thing, you know, really juvenile about it is the fact that it's animated. And even that doesn't even count. I mean, if you've seen we've all seen, you know, specific anime or other animated features or cartoons that are very adult oriented. So, because there was a scene in, I think it was the last episode with the droid ships, when they came into their new secret nest area, they just came in and sprayed like 20 people and just hosed them completely. They didn't show the execution of the last rebel who was there, and that commando droid sauced her. They didn't show that. Obviously, it was implied. But those other like 10 or 15 people that were up there, they got just slaughtered.
Yeah.
And we saw that. We saw this droid ship pop up. Brrr. We just didn't see blood and gore. We don't see that. And so that's
like we talked about before in the preview episode, you know, compared to a Band of Brothers that would show the blood splattering and the body limbs coming off. Dave's very good at working the quote unquote camera to keep it. You know, you're telling some very deep, intense stories, but you're not doing it in a way that people would find inappropriate for a animated show on a channel that's marketed to children.
Right. And we don't necessarily need the gore. You know, you can, and Dave's really good about that. You know, Dave is good about saying it without saying it. You know, we get enough decapitations and limb loss. We get enough gore from the Jedi. We don't necessarily need it from everybody else. So I think Dave is really good about that. So what are your thoughts? We see with Saw, you know, we don't want to jump too far ahead but we are starting to get a glimpse when, you know, Steela says, you know, we can't do this and risk civilians. You know, the look on his face was like, you know, you're right, but, you know, you're right, but, and in his mind, I'm sure he's thinking collateral damage for the greater good. And we find out that, you know, that's his mentality. Like he gets so obsessed with defeating the Empire for good reason. But it's like, again, that line, you know, how far are you willing to go for liberty and for freedom?
I kind of I was writing stuff down to think about for this episode, and one line, the first things I wrote was this story arc is a couple things, but it's also the tragedy of Saw Gerrera.
Yeah,
because we meet him later in life, and you find out what kind of guy he is, and I chuckle because I know there are people in certain circles that I was comparing me to Saw. So, you know, I was a very polarizing figure. I was a very intense figure. I just like the good guys. I mean, yeah, that was my crime apparently. So when you look at a guy like Saw and you see the extremes and even on Andor, like some of the difficulties he has keeping things straight, I see it almost as a tragedy because you think about if Steela had lived, I mean, their own people, their own, when they had that vote to who would be the leader, it wasn't like, one of the rank and file, nominated her. It wasn't, there wasn't a power struggle. It wasn't a popularity contest. There was no, back chatter, prom king kind of, drama.
Right.
They picked her because she was the best among them. And then
they believed in her.
They believed in her. And
they believed in her.
And I really feel like when she died, I thought, could you imagine how things would have gone differently had Steela lived to sort of be Saw's balance? Because that's in Rogue One, his biggest fault is that he gets unbalanced, up here. And he gets paranoid. He gets, there are no extreme. There's no extreme to extreme in his mind.
Right.
And I feel like Steela would have been the calming voice that would have sort of said, no, we can't go, like Luthen said, he Saw is too comfortable using the tools of his enemies to defeat them.
Yeah. And it's just, that's a great point, because they did balance each other out. She was that balance, even between Saw and I can't remember the young boys.
Lux Von Terry.
Lux. Yeah. So, even with them, she saw the value of both sides. She saw the value of words and politics, the necessity for that. And then she also saw the need for the fist and for violence. And she saw that there is a middle ground there. And if Star Wars has taught us anything, it's that the middle ground, while not as flashy or necessarily as powerful as the extremes, it's going to get you there in the best possible way. We see that with Steela. We see that with Ahsoka later on, that it's that middle ground. And that goes back to, obviously Star Wars is rooted in, Asian culture. And it just goes back to like Buddhism. Buddhism preaches the middle ground. Take the middle path. Don't focus on wealth. You don't have to live in abject poverty. Take that middle road, and you'll be fine. You'll be happy. And she was that. She was that counterbalance. And then, like you said, by her dying, he's just off the leash now, and now he's going to be moving, and we're going to see him again. We'll see him again in, I think, Rebels and in Bad Batch.
Saw's mindset to me very much reminds me of Luther from Andor, where it's he is committed to his cause. He knows he's doomed himself. He knows that at the end of the day, he's not going to live long enough to see the end results of his work.
Right.
And he knows that, for lack of a better term, he has doomed his soul for going down the path that he has done. But he is committed, and he is willing to make that sacrifice of himself to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Crash, like you said, it is the tragedy of Saw Gerrera. I mean, for anyone like him, what an incredibly lonely existence. Even though you're surrounded by people, who follow you, you're still really alone in knowing that you're pretty much the only person who has the will to do what must be done and to really, really get your hands dirty. It really is a tragedy, because had he just leaned a little bit more, onto the negotiating side, then, maybe things would have turned out differently. But, so that brings me to my big question. Do we as a society, just the human society, are people like Saw necessary, or do we need more people like Steela, someone that can walk that middle path between the pen and the sword and find value in both? But do we need those just extremely hardcore, blunt instruments like Saw Gerrera? Could the rebellion have existed or prevailed without him and his efforts? What do you guys think?
That's a great question. I think we need more people like Steela,
Okay.
but I also think you do need a couple of saws.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Saw Gerreras of the world get remembered sometimes for the wrong reasons. Everybody, Patton got a movie made about him because he was a blood and guts tank commander who, slapped one of his own men.
Yeah.
But a general like Omar Bradley, is why we win the war, is why we got through the post-war. The level-headed, committed, and loyal to their troops kind of mentality that Steela had is what gets things done. But people remember the flash. People remember the the flashier, bangy parts of the fight. And I think Saw sort of gets wrapped up in wanting to be right, wanting people to acknowledge that he's right. Even we'll see later on, some things. He's not wrong in what he believes in and believes about the Empire, but there's always that moment where somebody has to go, okay, Saw, but dial it down,
Right.
dial it back. And I think that was what Steela was. Steela was that little angel on the shoulder that kept him from going from liberator, to terrorist. And that's what we'll see later on with him in shows like Andor and Rebels and stuff.
So do we, well, not do we, but could the rebellion have succeeded without people like Saw Gerrera or Cassian Andor? Because those are two men that are very much cut from the same cloth and willing to do literally anything for the sake of liberty. Anything. Even if that means, whoa. What was
Somebody's in a
that?
hurry?
Yeah, seriously.
You guys heard that? Okay.
Yeah, weather's getting warmer, windows are open, people are on their bikes. Yep.
Yeah.
So Saw and Andor, they clearly played huge roles in the rebellion, and they were in many ways very instrumental in getting the rebellion off to a good solid start. Could there have still been success without them? Would it have just taken longer, or would it have been impossible without those blunt instruments when you're fighting something like the Empire?
So I think that, unfortunately speaking, in war, like there's a great line from West Wing, which is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, where they're talking about war crimes, and one of the generals says to Leo McGarry, all wars are crimes. At some point, that no matter how many rules you try to have in place, the very nature of war itself is a crime. And when you're going against in this case, the Empire, which has no qualms about, mass slaughtering people, destroying an entire planet. At some point, if you're not willing to be just as ruthless,
right,
you can't win. So I think that it is necessary to have people like Saw and Cassian, at least at the start, to actually start the fight and make the moves that you need to make to get things going. But you also absolutely need people like Steela, and I think you need more of them, to rally the rest of the people behind you once it's going. I mean, you mentioned it as the spark of the rebellion. I don't think that spark exists without people like Saw and Cassian.
Right. Because you need that pressure, you need that force. I mean, in order to create a spark, you've got to create friction. You've got to have that.
Right.
So,
and I think that's the role that they play. And I think people like Steela are the oxygen and the fuel to build the fire past that.
Great points. Crash, what do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. And I love that West Wing reference. I'm also a big fan of that show. And I agree. We sort of look in the moments of our own history and you say, okay, who was the spark? Who was the fuel? And there are times where you need people like Andor and Saw to get the ball rolling, to get people inspired to stand up and not just keep their head down. Like, in Rogue One, he asks Jyn, you okay with the Empire taking over the galaxy? And she goes, only if you don't look up. And that's a big lesson people need to take from not just from Rogue One, but this arc of Clone Wars, and to be honest, even like modern day life. There's things out there happening that people need to keep their head up. There's Marva Andor would say, don't be asleep, and that's
the term woke has taken on a different meaning these days, but in its literal term, you have to stay awake. You cannot sleep, because like Saw said, we allowed the separatists to take over Onderon. When anything bad happens in a nation, ultimately it's the fault of the people. I'm not victim shaming. I'm just saying, the people always have the numbers. The people always have the most to lose. So if they're not doing something, it's interesting. Sherry had I wish Sherry was on the show. While we were watching the last episode, she had, you see all the people coming out to Steela's funeral. There's thousands, tens of thousands of people there. And Sherry said, where the hell were all these people during the battle? And if you draw the parallels to things that are happening in our real world, where are all the people here? It's the same thing. Not everybody is going to go out to fight. Not everybody has that drive to do that. They may want change. They may want liberty, but not everyone has that fire or the courage that's necessary to do that. So when we see the vast majority of, these Onderon or ISIS, or not ISIS. It was ISIS, right? The city of ISIS.
Yeah.
Unfortunately named city.
That did not age well. But we see the vast majority of the citizens out there, and they did eventually start acting, but look at what it took for them to get there. It took so much for them to actually, for the people, capital P, to get pushed to the point where they're now getting off the bench and joining the game. So then, it's very much like what we see here. We've got millions and millions of people who do nothing or don't vote. I mean, we had, I don't know what the number is. I know it was like tens of millions of people who didn't vote.
It was something like 36%, did not vote at all. And another 10 voted independent. It was just like that.
Yeah.
It's what I've worked on local voter registration campaigns, and it's so frustrating because people say, well, why isn't voting mandatory? And I always kind of counter, well, do you want everybody's idiot cousin throwing off the scales just by going heads or tails? I mean, you need an informed electorate, you need a passionate electorate, and you need people that have to really take into account what these choices or leaders make will have on not just that. In the case of Onderon, the king even said, I was given a choice between the Separatists and the Republic, and he saw fault in both.
And he said it. He said it. And they're both corrupt.
Yeah.
And I love, not only do I love that the king said that, I love that Dave wrote that. I love that Dave is not shying away or pretending that the Republic isn't corrupt. That line, it's kind of a throwaway line, but it carries so much weight when you really stop to think about it. The fact of where that line came from. That line came from Dave and his writers, if not Dave himself, saying, I looked at both and both are corrupt. And I had to pick one before one of them picked for me.
Yeah. How many times in history have people had that choice made for them by somebody because they fit on a place in a map?
And we see it every day in the United States, certain states, when they, the whole gerrymandering thing, when they redraw, the voter registration lines or whatever. It's like, the whole district boundary was redrawn, in order to favor the voting for one way or another. And both parties are guilty of this. It's not one party or another, and that's what Dave said too. I think Dave, that's his way of saying it's, Democrats and Republicans, if we're looking at it real world, they're both corrupt. They both have their own agendas.
See, the problem is, and we can relate this to Star Wars, or we can relate this to real life. The issue is, like, in a perfect world, when we go in, like, personally, we should have more than two political parties, because that way no one party can have any true power, because they've got to work together. But that's neither here nor there. That's probably not going to happen in our lifetimes, because
that's a whole other money.
And yes, but to shrink this down, it would be great if going into the voting booth we had a choice between good and better. But in my lifetime, we've never had that. We've had a choice between bad and worse.
The lesser of the two evils.
Quite frankly, that's more important. And that's the part that aggravates me, is so many people are like, well, both sides are bad. Yes, they are. No arguments there. But if it's a choice between bad and worse, picking right matters.
It does. It does. And we've seen evidence of that since our nation's inception. And I know, we don't really talk politics very much, but Star Wars is politics. Star Wars is rooted in politics. And George himself drew in the politics of our nation into Star Wars. I mean, there's,
there's a great interview he did with James Cameron, two really good directors talking shop, and George, James, sort of laid it out for him that the rebellion was based off the Viet Cong, which means we're the empire. The general, is the idea is that America lost the Vietnam War, much like the empire did, because they started stepping into places they didn't need to be.
Right.
We, at the time, my dad, I talked to my dad about, he served during Vietnam. He wasn't in combat, but he was on a ship in the region. And he's got a very different for people who lived through that time, they were sort of fed this narrative that we were there to do good. And the protests, against the war were they take it personally, because, they came home and they said, people would, if you were in your uniform, people would spit on you.
Yeah.
As
absolutely.
You walk by. And now, people talk about that war, and we say, well, thank you for your service. It's become sort of a platitude.
It is.
And it's been interesting kind of talking to him as he's gotten older, where the reaction of the politics of his lifetime changed. That war wasn't popular at the time it was happening, but now it's been, and through movies and everything else, we sort of gloss over this idea that, well, we're still the good guys there, even though, things were done that I wouldn't exactly be proud of, our part in.
Of course.
But, it's hard when you're a family member of a participant in that war, that you just sort of go, well, what there's fault on both fronts on that. And that's
absolutely. And I don't know, this is probably a hot take, but I think that honestly, World War II is probably the last justifiable war, in my opinion. I think, for us to have been involved in. I mean, that was a war of necessity. I mean, war does not need to happen, but sometimes it needs to happen. And in that case, there was a very clear and defined evil. There was a very clear and defined level of human atrocity that was happening, and someone had to step in and make things right. But then you talk about like Korea and Vietnam and even the war in the Middle East, and it's like
the war on a vague concept like terror,
because I mean, that's, when you talk about, insurgents and insurrectionists and things like that, we, during Afghanistan and, the war in the Middle East, we referred to, the quote unquote enemy as, insurgents, we didn't refer to them as, anything else. And it's like, but they're defending their homeland and their way of life. And, it's like that region. Yeah. That region is completely overrun by religious fundamentalism, and a lot of people live poorly because of it. That region used to thrive prior to the onset of religious fundamentalism. That's where, beautiful music and high level mathematics and art and culture. That place was, that region was just a mecca of learning and creativity. And then that all got snuffed out and it all got stifled because of religious fundamentalism. But that's their culture, and at what point, again, we're talking about crossing lines this week. At what point, have we as a nation crossed the line into other people's problems? And that takes us back to the episode, because we see that with the Jedi Council, Obi-Wan and Anakin, they said, we just cannot get involved. We can't fight this war for them. And Ahsoka is having a hard time dealing with that. She's having a hard time really understanding, well, these people are fighting for liberty and they're dying. And it's like, it's not 100% our place to step in.
And you know who didn't have a problem? Hondo.
And then there's Hondo. Mm-hmm. Our boy Hondo. He's like, they paid very well. He doesn't give a shit.
That was one of my favorite scenes of Hondo, when he delivers those rockets, because that is him to a T.
Mm-hmm. And then when those commando droids showed up, he's like, "Oh, look at the time! It's time to go!" Bye.
Which makes you wonder how many times he's like just dropped off weapons like this in the middle of a firefight anywhere, and it's just like, he's not committed to the cause. He jokes to Anakin about being a delivery boy, but if the money's right, here's a pizza.
Mm-hmm. I love Hondo. He's great. And he did not even try to hide his presence. He came in that big luxury yacht and sat down at their secret base. And he's like, here you go. Ha ha. And then he takes off. Love Hondo. Absolutely love Hondo. With Ahsoka again, and the whole, should the Jedi have been involved or whatever, we do see them acting as advisors and trainers, almost taking on like a CIA type role, like going into a country, providing them with training and weapons and money. And Anakin even said that, I believe, or was it Obi-Wan? They said, we're still going to keep providing them with credits and arms, but we can't fight for them. Mm-hmm. So should
very
that
similar to what we're doing in Ukraine?
Very similar to what we're doing. So there's all these parallels. Like, yes, Star Wars is science fantasy, and yes, it is fiction, but the parallels between what's going on in a galaxy far, far away and what's happening here in the real world, not just now, but throughout, the years that Star Wars has been around, it's really amazing. And you can't have one without the other. You can't have the lightsabers and the space battles and all of that without the politics, because at its core, Star Wars is a cautionary tale. This is what's going to happen if you allow it to happen.
Star Trek was great. The original series, even the later series, were great about mixing in current political dilemmas, drama, whatever you call it, in a sci-fi setting, in a different universe. You could talk about so many different topics and not pretend to be taking a side or playing favorites to one or the other. And it was just, there's such good writing in that show.
Gene Roddenberry.
And it's the same with Dave on Clone Wars. There's such good writing and thoughtful writing, but not lecturing. Again, Clone Wars was sort of, at this point, is clearly gearing more toward an older audience.
Yeah.
But there's always that level of Star Wars being for, early adolescent kids, where was the first time you actually kind of got introduced to the concept of, well, what is a justifiable war? What is a patriot versus a terrorist? And like we've done just on this show, we're making comparisons to like George Washington versus other figures in history that just it all, like Obi-Wan says, it all depends on your certain point of view, and Star Wars is great at showing political struggles from a certain point of view.
Absolutely. And again, you can't have Star Wars without the politics. You got to do it. The Force, lightsabers, blasters, cute little monkey lizards, funky, funny pirates. You've got all that, but you got to have your politics in there. And I think we all can agree, going back to Hondo is underutilized. He is an underutilized character. I want to see Hondo in some kind of like a buddy road trip sort of movie. And I just don't know with who. I feel like him and Obi-Wan would have made like a great road trip team, because Hondo gets on Obi-Wan's nerves, but Obi-Wan can fire right back and be just as sarcastic and be just as as big of a smart ass. Like he would push Anakin's buttons too much, and Anakin would end up killing him. I
was hoping for a Hondo cameo in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Like
yes,
that would have been great. Even if it would have blown his cover, I'm like, okay, Hondo would not have snitched on his friend Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think for the right price, Hondo's gonna snitch, but no hard feelings. It's like, sorry, Obi. So if we're gonna wrap up here shortly, but
before we do that, I do have one question for you guys, because this is something I picked up on and I was kind of enjoying in the first episode.
Okay.
Again, this show is obviously following Ahsoka's path through life.
Yes.
What did you guys think of the pseudo love triangle?
Oh yeah,
her and Lux Von Terry, and before he realized she realized that Steela was his sister. There's a lot of longing glances going on when people are interacting with each other, and it was funny. As someone who's got a sister, and we used to go through his fan circle, I had people that thought Emily and I were a couple, and you have to go, no, dude, we're brother and sister. Like it's cool. I love that this was sort of like the Ahsoka after school special of like first time the boy she likes another girl.
Yeah, no, that's true. And honestly, it's glad that you brought this up, because there was one thing about this that kind of surprised me, was that there's a point where, and I don't remember if it's in the first or the second episode, where she turns to Anakin. She's like, just saying she's having a really hard time. She's clearly talking about this thing with Lux. And he's like, I totally understand. She seems surprised by that, which to me is wait. So, I mean, because to me, it was pretty clear that, at least going in, that Ahsoka had a pretty good understanding of Anakin and Padme. If it wasn't expressly discussed, she at least, had an inkling of what was going on there. So for her to be kind of surprised by his understanding was kind of threw me off a little bit.
Well, think about it. Up to this point, the three of them haven't really been around each other that much. There's only been a few instances where the three of them are together, and more often than not, it's usually Padme and Ahsoka who are kind of like hanging out doing the sisterhood thing. So I don't think Ahsoka, I think Obi-Wan at this point, is aware or has an inkling. But Ahsoka is I don't think she's seen it that much yet.
There's a great short in the they did with Anakin, Padme, and Ahsoka on a mission, and it sort of lets it slip that she's aware, that she kind of lets it slip to the two of them that she's aware of that unspoken thing. And I think this Onderon episode, I thought it was interesting that Anakin's trying to give relationship advice to her. And I'm going, dude, you are the bigger, you're the hotter mess than she is.
Yeah.
And you're giving love advice?
Yeah. Oh, I know. When he said that, when he was talking about, focus, purpose over feelings.
Yeah.
I was like Sherry and I looked at each other. We were like, come on, guy. Come on, Anakin. No. I'm not taking love advice from you. No, you don't. But he does have an understanding. He does, he gets it. And this is a little a crush for Ahsoka.
And to some degree, it was nice to see that Anakin can, without saying the whole thing out loud, can just kind of look at his panel and go, I can relate, kid. We've seen Obi-Wan had a girl that got away.
And he keeps it buried. He keeps it buried for now.
But Anakin, because we said, love is his weak spot. When he sees his Padawan having feelings about something that could be interfering with the mission, I was like, okay, pot calling the kettle black, but at least it's good advice.
He cares for her so much. He cares for her so much. I love it.
And one other thing I will say, and I don't hold any faith, I don't hold any belief in this, but it's fun to go down the path just like what we do with the Darth Jar Jar. I was reading, as part of this, because obviously I'm, for me this is the first time watching this, and came out years and years ago. So I went back and looked at some of the feedback, some of the talk that came out when these first episodes first dropped, and there was a very small portion of people that were like, so did Ahsoka try as hard as she can to save Steela, given that love triangle? I was like, come on, dude, she got shot in the back.
She did. Yeah,
of course she did, but it's kind of funny that they brought it up.
I had said that to Sherry too. I said, I was like, yeah, well, now she can get her boy back. And it was obvious. She really did.
Of course.
She really did try, but but that's one of those things, unfortunately, with Steela, it had to happen and for everyone's growth, unfortunately. But and also watching this, it just seeing Anakin interact with Ahsoka, the level of caring that he has for her, the amount of love that he has for her. And then I just started thinking about the scene with Ahsoka and Luke as we move ahead, her talk, while Luke is training Grogu and she's interacting with Luke, the son of this man that she loved and adored and cared for, like a brother, more than a brother. I don't even think there's a familial relationship that could describe the relationship between the two of them. It's like as much love, as much, caring as you can have for someone without it being romantic at all in any way. It was very profound. It was the relationship between the two of them. And it just breaks my heart. Anyway.
And just that smirk on her face when older Ahsoka says, I'm a friend of the family. I mean, she means it down.
She does. She is a friend of the family. She is family. I don't even like that she said that she's a friend of the family. Ahsoka, Queen, you are family.
I called her Auntie Ahsoka when that episode came out, because I was like, that's an aunt from another mother,
I am so excited to see more of Ahsoka. I want more Ahsoka. It's just, she is the best character in Star Wars. I will go out and I will say that, bar none, the best character in Star Wars.
And real quick, that the scene where the current king, whatever you think of him, was going to execute everybody, and Ahsoka was going to break cover. I love that. They kept showing her just strutting to the front. Like, it was interesting that, like you said earlier, Anakin and Obi-Wan get recalled back to Coruscant, and they leave her. It was almost like the kids on summer camp with kids her own age for the first time, and it's a very. I think she sort of she was trying to follow orders and not expose herself, and it was just that moment where it was like she was ready to break out those lightsabers and just be like, I can't let him die.
Yeah, and she's not that person. She can't let innocent people die, but it was nice seeing her too with this little crush that she has, because it also kind of like it shows her desire for normalcy, that need of any young person who's thrust into an extraordinary situation to want to have some normalcy in their life. She embraces the fact that she's a total fucking badass. She loves the fact that she's a badass and that she does badass shit. But I think in this, with her situation with Lux, that we do see that she wants a little normalcy, and then she gets friend zoned hard. After Steela kisses him, she gives him the old little chuck on the shoulder, like, look at you. And she just got friend zoned. I'm like, oh, Ahsoka got friend zoned. How could you do that? I mean, it never would have worked out anyway. I mean,
it would have been too much to repeat the same. Yeah, we know about Anakin and Padme. We now know about Obi-Wan and Satine. It'd have been a bit much for Ahsoka to also have a unrequited love thing going on.
They're too committed to their individual roles. And anyway, and Padme and Anakin have a weird, creepy relationship that's just unnatural anyway. It's like Palpatine would say, it's a relationship that some would not consider to be natural. I've never liked that relationship anyway. All right, so that's it. Do you guys have anything else that you want to talk about? Any note? Crash, you said you had some notes. Did we cover a lot of the stuff?
Yeah, we pretty much covered the whole spread. I'm going out to Fan Expo Cleveland this weekend. We're going to shoot some test footage for a new segment.
All right, I might see you out there.
Okay, we'll be out there and just having a good time.
All right, sounds good. Awesome. Tony,
I do have one little thing. As I know, none of us are particularly big sports people, but first weekend of March Madness, a very common time for a lot of guys to sit around and get drunk. I decided to do something a little different this year. So the final episodes of Young Jedi Adventures just released earlier this week.
Are you going to binge Young Jedi Adventure?
I am, and you know how I've got my little game that I like to play with this. So we'll see how this goes.
So we need to break this down for folks that maybe didn't hear about this in our first season. So as we've already discussed, if you're tuning in for the first time, or maybe you haven't gone back as far. When we started this, like we said, we're doing everything in chronological order. So at that time, it was before The Acolyte had come out. So the beginning of our chronological timeline started with Young Jedi Adventures, which is canon. So we watched a few episodes of that just to kind of get a feel for it. And we created a drinking game to go along with this children's show. And it is wildly inappropriate. And I think what was it like every time the kids are put into a situation that Child Protective Services would be called on? I mean, you take a shot.
That's one of the rules. That's one of the rules is, if they learn a lesson and then apply the lesson within the same episode, there's a drink.
So you're going to drink every episode. You're
exactly.
Yeah.
There's a few different ones. I'm gonna have to look up the rules again to pull it together.
But if you haven't seen Young Jedi Adventures, watch it. As an adult, I can say it's a lot of fun, especially if you add alcohol to it.
Mm-hmm.
So alcohol and kids shows just go together. I don't know why. It's just I would challenge anyone to find a kids show that they like, and I'm talking about a kids show. I'm talking about something like on I don't know, like the Disney Kids, or I mean, like just something like for like the preschool crowd, or like Young Jedi Adventures. That's like preschool-ish, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a demo. So Young Jedi Adventures, Dora, things like that, and make it a drinking game. If nothing else, like with Dora, you could apply the same things. Every time Dora is put in a situation where her parents could potentially be arrested for neglect, do a shot, and you'll be fucking hammered within 2 episodes. I promise you. Yes. You'll be done. You'll be completely schnockered. But there's something wrong with us when we turn kids' TV shows into drinking games. There's something. It's funny because I just saw that we had a viewer pop on, and as soon as we mentioned drinking and kids shows. There we go. Radio Beach. She says Blue's Clues. So all right,
that'll do it.
Radio Beach, you got it. Now that you brought it up, you got to type it in the chat. How are you drinking? How are you assigning shots to Blue's Clues? Is it every time Steve says handy dandy notebook, or every time Blue finds a clue, or what is it? Because we need to know now, because now I want to do that. Teletubbies is another one.
I'm purely joking here because I know he's a real guy and whatnot, but is that what happened to the actual Steve? Is that he was playing the game in real life and got fucked up? Because I know he disappeared for a long time.
He did, yeah. Steve disappeared. I think he ended up going to college or something. I think he just needed to, I think he went to college, fell on some hard times, and like you do, it happens. Poor Steve. But he was great. What was his cousin took over? What was his cousin's name? I don't remember. That other guy.
I don't have kids. I never watched the show.
I don't have kids either. I just watch kids shows. It's what I do. No, I have kids. My kids love that. And then there was another show called Ubi. I don't know if you guys ever seen Ubi, but it was like everybody, like the characters were hands. It was like just straight up like people's hands with these little eyeballs. Like they were wearing like, it was like a ring with eyeballs on it. And like they would just try, and everybody's hand was like a different shape. It's like, and they would just, there was a grandpa. It was like these two kids that lived with their grandfather, and I think it was called Ubi. All right, so Radio Beach says for the Blue's Clues drinking game, in the mail chair, and then when Blue finds a clue. Yeah,
I mean that's a guaranteed couple shots.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. I wonder who it's from. Yeah, I was a stay-at-home dad for a minute. So that Bear in the Big Blue House, that was great. They had mail on that too. I don't know what is it about mail on kids shows? What's in the mail today? What's in the mail today? I don't know. Anyway, we're losing all of our viewers now. All right. Thanks for, I guess that's a wrap. We've stopped talking about Star Wars.
Yeah, we've run out of talking wise. We're just on tangents now. So
we're on tangents. All right, we're done. That's why we have a set schedule that we're supposed to follow, and we never do. All right. So that's going to be it. So homework for next week, season 5, episodes 6, 7, 8, and 9. So 4 more episodes for you. And that is the kids arc. I think that's the younglings arc, if I'm not mistaken. More Ahsoka, more growth. Radio Beach said kids love mail. And I guess that's true. When you're an adult, you don't love mail anymore because it's always bills.
Well, yeah. When you remember when you were little, you got excited when like a card from grandma came in or something. It was always fun.
Oh, yeah. Now grandma's dead, so you don't get cards from grandma, and everything else in the mail is just bad news. It's either spam or it's I don't even get excited about email. It's like, adulting is the worst sometimes, man.
It can be.
It is.
Oh, all right. Radio Beach says, good show, guys. I'm out. Thanks for joining us and joining us in the chat. I appreciate you. All right. So before we head out, we're going to do some of the obligatory pimping like we do. Please check us out on all social media at the SWS Show. And of course, if you want to get some sweet Star Wars safe space merch, like I'm wearing right there, you can head on over to our website, circleofnerds.com/merch, and pick you up a hoodie or a t-shirt or something and show your love of being Swarzy curious. And we would appreciate it, because also every little bit that does roll in, we use that, we put that right back into the show. And if we ever reach a point where we can have like ads or anything like that, we'll try to be ad free. So if you wanted to help us out in that way to keep things ad free, then, because we all see enough ads, there's plenty of ads out there. So yeah. And if you'd like to know what's coming up next, you can check out our timeline in the show description on our website. And that's going to be circleofnerds.com/the SWS show. So we got our whole timeline on there so you can see what we're going to be watching. So thank you very much for tuning in this week. We really, really do appreciate you. And of course, thanks to all of our active duty military members and veterans for their service and sacrifice. So thank you very, very much. We appreciate you. And next week, I think the 25th is actually going to be Medal of Honor Day. So definitely tip of the hat to all of those folks that have been a recipient of the Medal of Honor, because you don't get that on good days. We'll just say that. So we have a lot of love and respect for all of our service members and veterans. But the Medal of Honor winners, not winners. I always say winners. You don't win the Medal of Honor. You receive it because you've earned it on the worst day of your life. And so yeah, anyway, so that's so if you know a veteran, if you know an active duty service member, if you know a Medal of Honor winner, if you're aware, just shake their hand. You don't have to say thanks for your service. It's whatever. If you want to, if it makes you feel good, that's fine. Just shaking hands, pat them on the back, whatever you want to do, something like that. So all right, so that's going to be it for us. Anybody have anything on the way out?
See you next week.
Yep.
No, yeah, that's it, right? We'll see you next week. Let me see if I can do this right. I'll put that there like that, and we'll see if I push the button the right way. All right. Fingers crossed that I pushed the right button. I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway. All right.
Anthony.
So thanks, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us again this week. And we almost got Felicia Day on the show this week, by the way. We'll talk about that more another time. So this close, I think. She was here in Cleveland. She was hanging out at the West Side Market. So
Nice. There you go.
There's close. All right. So that's going to do it for us. Again, thanks everyone for joining us. And remember, as always, if no one does anything nice for you, do something nice to yourself. And we'll see y'all next week.